my mother started being very, I don't want to use the word antagonistic, but we started having a lot of conflict. Apparently, according to her, I started showing her attitude. And the reason why I was showing her attitude, according to her, is because I felt that I was on her level because I was having sex with her husband. So these are her words from her perspective. So she told me one day that I stole her husband. And I'm looking at her and I'm just like, of course, I'm just like, well, how does that even make sense? And she says, you stole my husband from me. She said, Aziza, I cannot compete with you because you're a child and a swad likes children. Of course, that created even more of a divide between us. And, I lost my mom from a very early age. She wasn't my mom. She was according to her, I was her competition. She was my sister wife. It's like the dynamics of our relationship became even more complicated. And mother-daughter relationships are complicated, but it became even more complicated and just toxic in general because of what my father was doing to me.
Oh my gosh, what a mess. I can't imagine what kind of brainwashing your mother was, I don't know if accustomed to is the right word, but exposed to make her twist her reality in a way that fits your father's narrative. Now, obviously, your father is very charismatic, and those type of people, those type of cult leaders and people who want power and control, they do have ways of shifting the narrative to make people believe it. And I've been there. I've been under the control of people like that, and I know what it's like. And part of you is like, doesn't quite make sense. But then another part of you is like, well, I'm supposed to trust them. Well, they seem to have my best interests at heart. And also you're a child. So as you've mentioned, of course, you're going to follow what your parents are saying and not question anything. And you're so isolated, cut off from family. You're not going to school. You don't know that it should be different, even though it doesn't feel right. So, wow. So how many people were in that home, that unfinished home? You had just had a baby and you have other siblings now too, right?
Yes. So by then my mom had, hold on, I have to count. She's had 9 children, including me. Yeah. So by then there were 7 children, and then my mom and dad. Yeah. Living in a room that was taped off with, it sounds unreal. Like sometimes I think about, and I tell my kids the stories, and it's like, wow. Humans are so adaptable, and you can put us in all kinds of conditions and we make the best of it.
Well, you have to, right?
Right. You have to survive. And I understand the terminology, survival of the fittest. My father took the small piece of land that this house was on, because this is still a metropolitan area, even though this house reflected what East Orange was. Houses had been built up around it, and there was a U-Haul built right next to the house. So what he did was he put up privacy fencing, tilled all of the ground that belonged to the property, that belonged to him, tilled it up. I actually did a lot of the tilling with a pickaxe, and planted fruit trees and a garden in the back. So at this point, he decided to stop eating dairy. He decided to stop eating processed foods. And we grew everything We grew mostly everything that we ate. I was responsible for it. I did pick up a love of cooking. And I started being interested in cooking before my parents separated me from my grandmother. And I would watch her make fried dumplings. And she was a Jamaican woman. And I just was so fascinated by the idea of taking these raw materials and creating something completely different. So I guess that might be the scientist in me. And then my father also cooks. And I think because he was kind of adopting this holistic vegetarian lifestyle, he started doing things like baking bread from scratch and making cakes from scratch. And this is the duality of him. He made all of his children's birthday cakes. Before the abuse got worse, he was like the biggest kid. He loved throwing birthday parties for his children. And so when I started showing interest in cooking, he fostered that. And my mom would have me cut up the vegetables and contribute to making dinner. Then when I got a little older, my parents started leaving me home with my siblings when I was 9. At the time, they would not allow me to use the stove. So the most we could eat was like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. But then they started leaving home for longer and longer periods of time. And then when my little sister was born, my mom breastfed all of her children. She would be gone for hours and my sister would just be crying because of course she would breastfed and she would not pump milk. So, so I was developing all of these skills just to take care of my siblings. And that expanded into cooking so that I had to get creative with trying to give them food that wasn't just cereal or peanut butter and jelly sandwiches without using the stove. And just having to do all of those things, I think just sparked my ingenuity. So now by the time we're moved into the house in East Orange, I immediately took to growing all of the food and cooking with open flames, because of course we didn't have the resources. I remember the only thing we had was my father plugged up or connected electricity was what was called at the time a Decosonic. It was basically a tabletop oven, a tabletop convection oven. And I learned to bake cakes in that thing and cook rice in an oven. They say that necessity is what is the term? Necessity is the heart of invention.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And that was the case living in this house. So
what was your recovery like being so young and having a newborn?
Oof.
And not having any medical help?
In my father's words, I bounced back. So as far as the medical help, that didn't seem too out of the ordinary because I had witnessed and contributed to delivering so many of my siblings. So this is just what it was, what do you need a doctor for? Baby comes out, mom cleaned it up, cut the umbilical cord. So I did not have any fear as far as giving birth was concerned. I had seen it so many times. It was a natural process. What I was afraid of was having a girl. I was not afraid of actually giving birth. I was afraid of having a girl because then my father could possibly target her. So even while we were in the house, that's when he started molesting my sisters. And before he started doing that, when he was only abusing me, he would require me to do all kinds of things. And my father was really demented. So he would basically experiment on me in different ways sexually and then keep me compliant by saying, well, if you don't want me to go to this sister, then you won't complain. If you do this with a smile, then I won't touch your sister. So that became a part of the control aspect. So there were the threats to my life, the threats to my mom's life, the threats to my siblings who did not have birth certificates because he delivered them at home. And he used all of these things to maintain control. Well, in his words, if the government doesn't know that they're alive, then they won't know that they're dead. So that was a part of the control mechanism as well. So when I had a baby, she had no birth certificate. She immediately became one of his bargaining tools. Now, he If you accept that he was capable of love, whatever that looks like. My father adored my daughter when she was a baby. Even my other children, he considered them his royal blue blood children. So a lot of the things that applied to my siblings and myself through any forms of punishment or whatever we had access to, it was completely different when it came to my children. He did not hit them. He did not yell at them. Like, he took on this whole different parenting behavior.
Interesting.
And my mom became jealous of that. So then she started building even then animosity towards my children, because in her mind, from her perspective, he treated my children better than her children because he was her children.
Oh my gosh.
The different forms of control that he put into place is just uncanny.